here to discuss a new era in Washington. What happens next? Key legislative issues and how dealers can engage. Is Patrick Kalpin, Director of Grassroots Advocacy with NADA. Please give him a warm welcome.
Good morning. My name is Patrick Kalpin. I'm the Director of Grassroots Advocacy for the National Automobile Dealers Association. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. My title of my presentation and workshop today is A New Era in Washington, D.C. What happens next? Key legislative issues and how dealers can engage. A little bit of a brief biographical background on me. I've been with the association for a little more than 10 years. Before that, I spent 8 years working for American Honda in their legislative and their offices in California. I also spent 5 years as a Capitol Hill staffer. So I've been a lobbyist in the auto industry for a little more than 18 years. I love two things. I love cars and politics, so I'm doing a real great job. And again, appreciate the opportunity to be here. We're going to talk, I've got a little disclaimer that I've been asked to show. Let's go ahead and begin. I think most of us woke up on Wednesday, November the 9th, in a little bit of a state of shock when we had the election of President Trump. Let me just say this right up front. I don't think any of us, especially those of us inside the Beltway, expected the outcome that we got. Having said that, he is the President of the United States. He was sworn in just a couple of days ago in Washington, D.C., and he is the President. I think it's going to provide many significant challenges for us as an industry, but also many significant opportunities as well. I think many of people know the President has spent a significant amount of time, in fact, the most of his life in business. I think most of them view him as a pro-business chief executive. We also have a Congress that is controlled by the Republicans too. So I think we have a pro-business Congress and a pro-business president. And like I said, lots of opportunities, maybe some challenges. I think one thing many people think about President Trump is he's a deal maker. He's a negotiator, and I think he points himself as a point of pride about that. He talks about deals he's done all over the world for hotels and resorts and other developments. I think that remains to be seen how that will help him or potentially hurt him, as he is in many ways the chief negotiator for the United States with other countries, other nations around the world. His America First campaign, I think, was fairly unconventional. I think that's just to say the least. His focus, particularly on the auto industry, was also somewhat unprecedented, including some tweets and some mentions of GM, Ford, and Chrysler. Not just during the campaign, but also during the transition. And then just most recently, earlier this week, meeting with the CEOs of GM, Ford, and Chrysler, and some mentions about some product plants that they were planning to do, and discussions about public policy, how the administration could help the auto industry. So I think we would expect the auto industry to be at or near the top of his agenda. You have to bear in mind about the president that he in many ways owes his administration and his win to a lot of those auto workers in some of those key states like Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, who delivered somewhat of a razor-thin majority for him. And as a result, I think he's going to pay significant attention to especially the manufacturing industry and getting more people back to work who haven't been before, whether it's in the final assembly factories or whether it's in some of those parts manufacturing plants that may have moved overseas. I think he wants to bring them back as much as possible. So as I mentioned before, we've got not just a Republican in the White House. We are going to have Republicans controlling Congress. The gentleman on the left is Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader from Kentucky. On the House side, we have Speaker Paul Ryan from the state of Wisconsin. I think you will have a virtuous cycle. I think whereas before you had a Republican-controlled Congress and a Democrat in the White House, you had some inability, some gridlock, if you will, that would happen. I think the fate of the Trump presidency will not be decided necessarily by the executive orders of what comes out of the White House. It will really be decided by what goes on in the halls of Congress and what Majority Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan are able to deliver. I think you already see a little bit of tension going on right now between the two of them in terms of some policy issues that the president has brought up just in the last week or so. I think you're seeing the president telling his members of his party to fall in line, that he is the chief executive, he is the leader of the Republican Party, and it's either it's my way or get out of my way. So I think it remains to be seen what the Republicans on the Hill are going to be able to do, and how much they're going to be able to fall in line and get legislation done for this country that the president wants to have, that he talked about during the campaign. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the confluence of three different areas. We're going to talk about public policy, we're going to talk about grassroots, and we're going to talk about political activities. Some people say, Patrick, really, what's the difference between public policy and political? Really, public policy is what we do in the legislative office. Public policy really means the drafting of legislation, the working it through a committee process, getting it to the floor, getting it past a specific House chamber, getting similar efforts in the Senate, getting it to the president's desk, getting a law enacted. The political side is really where the campaigns are involved, and re-elections, and the high cost of getting re-elected. We're going to talk a little bit about our political action committee that NADA has. And lastly, we're going to talk about grassroots. We're going to talk about the men and women who work at our dealerships around the country. As we know, we have 17,000 dealerships around the country with over 1.1 million people. We have a grassroots army that is ready to be deployed in this in Washington, D.C. and around the country. NADA is known for being advocacy at its heart, and we appreciate the support that dealers around the country, their employees, their vendors, their customers have helped us out over the past 100 years. But we do have a grassroots army, and we are ready to deploy that at any time. As I mentioned, advocacy has been at the heart of NADA for 100 years. Here we are in New Orleans celebrating the 100th anniversary of NADA. The story goes, in 1917, a small group of dealers came to Washington, D.C. to protest and oppose a luxury tax that was going to be charged on an automobile. The dealers argued it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And they successfully defeated that legislation, and that is what's formed NADA back in 1917. And for the past 100 years, NADA has been a strong advocate, and advocacy has been at the heart of this association, and it's the heart of what I do as the Director of Grassroots Advocacy for NADA. A little bit about the NADA Legislative Affairs Office for those of you that may not be familiar with it. As NADA calls itself the voice of the dealer, we are the voice of dealer on Capitol Hill. We are the liaisons between you in the dealership and the federal government. Obviously, the federal government over the past decade, or frankly many decades, have been very much involved in our business, particularly going back to the bankruptcies, the dealership closures in 2008, 2009, 2010. We have been we are in the halls of Congress every single day. My office, there's 11 people that work between our public policy office and our political staff to advocate dealers every single day, to protect and promote your business, to educate legislators on what they are considering in the halls of Congress, bills, regulations, reforms, so forth, what the impact is on you at the dealership level. What we do in the legislative and the lobbying office is really not that much different than what is done in the sales room every day. You sell cars, we sell public policy. You close deals, we close deals as well too. Educators, salesmen, liaisons, again, it's very similar. We're all in the sales business, and I think many of you in the audience could be as well as a grassroots lobbyist as we are. In fact, as a professional lobbyist, I like to say this a lot, as a professional lobbyist for you all at NADA, we can really only do so much in terms of getting legislation done. It's one thing for a member of Congress to hear me come in and talk and pitch a specific idea. It's another thing for constituents like you around the country to pick up the phone and call the member of Congress and say, I care about this too, or send them an email or get on social media. We have, as I said before, this enormous grassroots army ready to be deployed, and we're all in the sales business, getting members of Congress to come to our side and understand what Washington is doing. Many people look at a lobbyist and they say, oh, lobbyists don't exactly have a great view, or most Americans don't exactly have a great view of a lobbyist or a special interest at all. Believe it or not, what I do and what you can do as a citizen lobbyist is actually written into the First Amendment. It is a right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's where lobbying comes from the First Amendment, and I think we're pretty good at it here at NADA.
If the dealer gets
I'm going to show you a short video here about some of the challenges that have occurred in Washington, D.C. over the past 8 years.
They're simply quoting back some other rate, 8 or 10 or 14%.
This is what keeps poverty in these communities. We have these blue suede, slick dealers taking advantage of the most vulnerable people.
There is stunning news tonight about the biggest recall in American history. Upwards of 69 million cars with potentially explosive and defective airbags.
2015 saw the best auto sales in history. And this year, the momentum continues. Local franchise dealers, auto and truck retailers continue to lead the economy. But dealers are still under attack.
Auto dealer markups in this area are costing consumers about $26 billion a year. Auto dealers got a specific exemption from CFPB oversight. Give the CFPB the authority it needs to supervise car loans and keep that $26 billion a year in the pockets of consumers where it belongs.
Manufacturing upstarts like Tesla with its electric vehicles seek to sell their vehicles directly to consumers rather than through dealer networks. And these are forcing us to re-examine the way that cars are sold.
He who rejects change is in the cemetery.
It's time to clear out the white noise in Washington. And NADA is leading the charge to clear the noise. It's time to clear out the white noise on auto financing. It's time to clear out the white noise on recalls. It's time to clear out the white noise on tax reform. It's time to clear out the white noise on auto retailing. And who can clear out the white noise in Washington? More than 17,000 dealerships driving their local economies, with over 1 million good-paying jobs. Men and women working on Main Street, helping to build and live the American dream, providing affordable transportation to millions of American families. Loyal customers, driving the national economy with record new car and truck sales. The most efficient, affordable, competitive market in the world. And you, the dealer, are the catalyst of this entire system. It's time for you to clear out the white noise in Washington. Your dealership, your employees, your communities, your government, your voice. Are you ready?
So are you ready? Are you ready to join our grassroots army? If so, let's get started. And we're going to teach you how to be not just the voice. We're the voice of the dealer on Capitol Hill. We need you to be the voice of the dealer back home. So let's get started on some of the public policy issues we're facing. What can dealers do? Dealers can start by getting to know some of the issues. We know you're not subject matter experts. You're people who are taking care of your customers back home in the dealership, selling, financing, servicing, maintaining those lifetime owner in your dealership at all. But we need you to understand some of the issues, understand some of the impact of what Washington is trying to do that may either help or hurt your business at all. And more importantly, we need you to help deliver that message. We need you to get to know your members of Congress, build that long-term relationship, be the voice of the dealer at home, be the voice of the dealer for your colleagues who may or may not be able or may be unwilling to engage. We need you to step forward. We need you to be part of that grassroots army here. So let's start the policy issues here. We're going to start with what's called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which quite frankly has been the top of our legislative agenda for the past 8 years. A little bit of a brief background about CFPB. The CFPB was formed as part of what was known as Dodd-Frank. It was part of the Wall Street Reform Bill that was created in 2009. CFPB is headed by a gentleman by the name of Richard Cordray, who's a former Attorney General for the state of Ohio. One of the things to think about the CFPB is when the Dodd-Frank bill was going through Congress, we here at NADA saw the potential harm of what this new bureau could do to us as a dealership and to us as a nation at all. And one of the things we sought out, and with the thanks of and the help of dealers around the country, we got a specific exemption. so that the CFPB cannot come into your dealership and say, show me every single deal jacket for the past 6 months, and do basically an audit on you. There was a wall it was an exemption is what it was called, so that the CFPB doesn't have jurisdiction over you, the dealers. However, what they do have jurisdiction over are the banks and the lenders who dealers deal with every single day. And we're going to talk a little bit about some sort of the pressures that they have been putting on lenders, who then in turn have been putting some of the pressures on you, the auto dealers. So let me jump back a little bit to, I won't spend much time on it. On March of 2013, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau came up with something called a guidance. It wasn't anything that the folks on Capitol Hill did. It was a project they came up with on their own. And what they were alleging is a fair credit risk. In other words, that they were given evidence, they were given a set of data that showed that certain automobile dealers were charging protected classes, certain minorities, a higher interest rate than they were, say, a Caucasian customer at all. In many ways, they were alleging discrimination. They were calling us racists at all. One of the things that was a pretty serious allegation that we went back to them, and we had folks on Capitol Hill that went up to them and said, wow, show us some of the data here. That's a pretty serious allegation. Because one of the things the CFPB was doing was they were taking the data set that they had, and they had last names and they had zip codes. And by taking those two pieces of data, they were making assumptions about whether a customer was a minority or not. And quite frankly, that was too big of a leap for them to make. And one of the things we were able to find through some back channels is an error rate in that database of almost 40%. In other words, they were making assumptions, they were making guesses based on flawed data, using a bad methodology, and just starting off on a really bad note. One of the things they were attempting to do is they were attempting to remove the discretion that you all have in your dealerships to discount interest rates that go on in your F&I office. We all know that happens every single day in your dealership. Customer comes in with a pre-approved loan, 4.9% from the credit union they belong to. Chances are the F&I manager says, I want to earn your business. Let me see if I can lower that interest rate. Let me see if I can lower that monthly payment instead. And that happens, we know, every single day in our dealership here. We believe that if the CFPB had its way, pushing everyone towards non-discountable, very important, non-discountable flat fees could actually result in a higher interest rate for a customer because of perhaps a higher flat fee that an F&I manager may be finding. What that's going to do is going to discourage or eliminate your dealer's ability to do a meter beat discounting, which, as I said before, occurs every single day in the showroom. So one of the things we do on Capitol Hill is as we talk about the crafting of legislation, we help draft legislation, we help get legislation introduced. You had two bills in the 114th Congress, H.R. 1737 and S. 2663, which were identical bills. They did exactly the same thing. You know, most people talk about the laws and the regulations or the bills that are thousands of pages long. This was a page and a half long. It's really simple. And if you read at the top, it says it will nullify the certain guidance of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In essence, what it did, it said, CFPB, start over. You did it badly the first time. If you want to do it again, you're going to have to do it a little more sunshine. Everybody wants more sunshine, of course, in the federal government, a little bit more transparency. They failed to consult with some of their colleagues in other federal departments when issuing this guidance. And so in many ways, this legislation would kind of hit the restart button. And thanks to the help of dealers around the country, back in November of 2015, we passed H.R. 1737 by a vote of 332 to 96, which is a great win for NADA and a great win for dealers. I do want to point out that we did it with the help of 88 Democrats who defied the Obama administration, who defied their leadership in Congress. As a matter of fact, on the morning of November 18th, one of the lead Democratic members in the House of Representatives said to her colleagues in a caucus meeting, if you support this bill, you're supporting discrimination in this country here, which is quite frankly shocking. But it's quite honestly because of the work of the dealers around the country, phoning, emailing, texting members of Congress saying, I want you to support 1737. That's how we got 332 votes. And quite honestly, I've also had members of Congress come up to me and say, that was the toughest vote I had last year. They were under enormous pressure from civil rights organizations, other advocacy groups to say, oppose H.R. 1737. But I thank you from the bottom of my heart and our heart in NADA that we got 1737 passed. I will say we didn't have as much success with the Senate bill as 2663. It was introduced in the middle of 2016, and with the election and the outcome, we were hoping to get it done at the end of the year. We were told by the Majority Leader's office to say, you know what, hold off. We're going to have a Republican in the White House. There's going to be some changes coming down the line with the CFPB. Just be patient with us, and we're going to get to it when we start with the new Congress here. So a lot of people like to talk about what sort of changes are going to happen at the CFPB in 2016. What's going to happen in the 115th Congress with the new administration? The picture there is of Richard Cordray. He's been the director of the CFPB since its inception. He's also just a fun little fact trivia. He's also a 5-time Jeopardy winner, believe it or not. So going back to a number of years ago, I think you can probably find him on YouTube if you look it up. So the CFPB has been led by a single director since its inception. I think one of the changes you are likely going to see coming out of this administration and out of this Congress is their desire to create a commission instead. Government and a lot of the bureaus and a lot of the other departments around in the federal government have a commission. It could be a 3-member commission, could be a 5-member commission, bipartisan. Some are appointed by Republicans, some appointed by Democrats. I think that's one thing you might see coming down the pipeline very soon, supported by some Republicans. The other thing to point out is the CFPB, when it was created, was given almost a virtual unlimited funding. And the funding did not, however, come from the folks on the Capitol Hill. It came through the Federal Reserve Board. They were given some sort of independence to say that we shouldn't be influenced at all by politics. We should go ahead and just be a little more nonpartisan. But the fact is that they're independent. Mr. Cordray is really accountable to no one at all. None of the folks in Congress. He's come up to Capitol Hill and testified a number of different times. Both Democrats and Republicans have tried getting questions answered at all, and just the CFPB outright refuses altogether. And I think it's been very frustrating for a lot of members of Congress who want to have oversight over the agency. One of the things I want to stress is that when the CFPB came out with that allegation a number of years ago, or a couple of years ago, NADA and our other auto dealer trade associations did provide a response known as the Fair Credit Compliance Policy Program. This is a voluntary program that if you're not already using it right now, we ask you to take a look at this. It's an opportunity for you and your sales team to document why a specific individual received the interest rate that they did. What were the circumstances that when Ms. Hernandez came in to buy that vehicle at all, what sort of situation was she in? Was she in did she have a competing loan from another bank, from a credit union at all? Did she have a monthly payment constraint? It provides you a little bit of documentation to put into the deal jacket about justifying why a specific customer received an interest rate. The booklet is about 10 or 12 pages long. In the back of that is the participation certification form, basically documenting why the customer received the interest rate. The customer never sees this form. The sales associate sees it, and the general sales manager does. Put it in the deal jacket. Give yourself a little bit more peace of mind so that if anybody ever came examining your deal jackets, if a lender came in and said, tell me a little bit more about this circumstance. Why did she get this specific interest rate here? It provides you a little bit of evidence. It's not a get out of jail free card by any means at all, but it does provide you a little bit of certainty going forward in the years to come. Okay, let's switch topics. We're going to talk a little bit about vehicle recalls right now. Here's a chart that we created going back to 2008. And you have just seen the huge surge that has occurred in vehicle recalls in this country, especially within the past 24 to 48 months or so. I don't yet have the numbers for 2016. They should be coming out probably in the next couple of weeks from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. lot of people ask me, especially up on Capitol Hill, why do we see such a surge in recalls, especially from Takata, but going back to the GM ignition switch and even going back to the time of the Toyota unintended acceleration of the sticky pedal. I think I trace it back really heavily to, anybody remember Ford Firestone a number of years ago? The Ford Firestone situation, obviously a huge recall, some fatalities that occurred as a result of that. Congress passed something that was known as the TREAD Act that required automakers to more quickly and rapidly report recalls to the customers, to the general public. And I think also a number of plaintiffs' attorneys, I think, have been chasing after some automakers saying, you need to report this information. And I think that's why, in part, why you've seen a larger surge. Obviously, there has been a problem with Takata airbags out there for a while. Automakers have done a lot to get that, to get those vehicles in. One of the things that NADA I want to stress here is that we want to get a large, as many customers into our dealerships as possible. We want to get 100% recall completion rate. On average right now, we're getting about 70%, depending on the campaigns. Some campaigns are 90, 95%. Some of them are 10 or 15%. Some of it depends on how much the media has given this, how much the general public is aware of the concern. We're trying to get as many of those customers back into the dealerships. I also want to give a shout out to our state dealer associations around the country who their work in the state legislatures around the country have helped get better reimbursement rates for dealers, for those customers that do come in. It's important that we try to get as many of those customers back in and give them the certainty. One of the biggest challenges, I think, as many people know, is parts availability. We all know that parts availability has been challenging, especially in the early months of Takata, but even going back years ago too. When an automaker recalls 2 million Fords, I won't pick on Ford, I'll just use that as an example, it's going to take them a number of months for Ford to be able to manufacture that part and get it to the dealerships. But so parts availability has been critical, and we are doing our best, and I know the manufacturers are doing their best to get customers and dealers and get those consumers back in. NADA has published something. If you go onto the NADA website, if you type in your member identification, there is an FAQ on safety recalls. We would ask you to take a look at that. There's a website that we mentioned in here called safercar.gov. That is the official website of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. It's a VIN lookup tool. I know many manufacturers have their own proprietary systems, but we get a lot of questions, and our legal and regulatory team have a number of questions about NADA and safety recalls regarding new vehicles, used vehicles, parts availability. This is a good checklist for you to be familiar with and read and understand. So two things Washington, D.C. and folks on Capitol Hill do really, really well. The first is they don't do anything. The second thing is they overreact. Congress has a tendency to overreact in response to an incident, a media story, maybe there was an accident, maybe it was a tragic loss of life. Members of Congress seems like they're always behind, one step behind. And I want to show an example here. This is Senator Richard Blumenthal, who is a senator from the state of Connecticut. Senator Blumenthal saw the news about Takata over the past number of months or so, and he introduced a piece of legislation last Congress known as S-900 that would prohibit a dealer from selling or wholesaling, can't send it to the auctions, a used vehicle under an open recall. We thought this was a perfect example of an overreaction. I think many people know, as you look at the recalls that have come in over the past number of months, number of years or so, there's a wide variety of recalls that occurs in this country here. It could be something safety related. In many cases, it's not safety related. The example we like to provide are the peeling window stickers that are coming off a sun visor, or let's say it's a misprint in an owner's manual. In those cases that's not a safety related, issue. It's an administrative issue at all. There should be no reason that car is still deemed safe by both the manufacturer and NHTSA. If Senator Blumenthal had his way, he would take that vehicle off the used car lot, put it in the back by the fence, what we call the rot lot, and wait for that vehicle to be repaired, or wait for that part to become available, which, as you know, could be months before that vehicle is remedied. Our concern is that one of the points we talk about is that it would devalue a customer's trade-in. If you were a Chevy dealer and you have a customer trading in a Ford, you find out that vehicle is under an open recall, chances are you're going to probably have to give that customer a few less dollars for that vehicle. Customer may balk at that and say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'll go sell it myself. Sends that vehicle into the private market. They go down to the Walmart parking lot. They put it on Craigslist. That vehicle gets sold, but it never gets into a dealership. It never gets fixed at all, and it keeps that problem persisting. So we think Senator Blumenthal's proposal is overly broad. It would create what we call a trade-in tax. And we've actually approached the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to say, would you think about some sort of a tiering system instead? Some sort of a recall tiering, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, depending on the severity. Quite frankly, they're not interested in that idea, but it's something that we may look at again this year, again with a new administration, some new leadership at NHTSA. Last year, we did a study with J.D. Power just to talk a little bit about this trade-in tax. I want to highlight that. We found, or the folks at J.D. Power found, that there was an average of about a 60-day wait for parts, and that yielded about a $1,210 diminished value. That's the trade-in tax we're talking about here. Quite frankly, if you're looking at some of the luxury vehicles, it could be a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 diminished value or trade-in tax that the customer would end up eating, and it would not be good for anybody at all, too. So, but we need to think about the think about the impact on the consumer and what this means when it comes time to trading in those vehicles. Okay, let's shift to something that is going to become a bigger and bigger issue for those of you at the dealership level, and what Washington is going to do. You know, for the past 7 years or so, the CFPB has been our top legislative issue. I think with some of the changes that are going to be coming down the line with Director Cordray and some of the changes in the administration, I think CFPB may become a secondary issue, maybe even a third level issue, and I think tax issues are going to become probably the most dominant issue for dealers to think about and to understand what the impact is going to be. You know, it's been 31 years since the last major tax reform package has happened in the United States, and the IRS tax code has grown to more than 74,000 pages, to the point where most Americans can't understand. They can't digest what the tax code means for them, how it may save them a little bit of money. I think a lot of Americans are frustrated at sending more money to Washington, D.C. and not understanding where it goes. The gentleman in the picture there is a gentleman by the name of Kevin Brady, who is a Republican congressman from Texas. He's also the chairman of what's called the Ways and Means Committee. This is the primary tax writing committee in the House of Representatives. And he's come up with what's called a blueprint. And one of the ideas in his blueprint is that he wants the Americans to be able to fill out your income taxes on a postcard. Let's be able to simplify it. Let's cut down the number of brackets that there are. Let's simplify it in a way that Americans can understand, because in his idea, Washington takes too much of your hard-earned dollars. He's being challenged, I think in many ways by himself, to get it done. And here's some of the ideas that they're talking about. So again, this is an idea. It's not yet a formal bill yet. This is a proposal of some of the tax reform possibilities that will likely be coming down the line that you as the dealers need to be ready for. So in general, what the Republicans want to do is they want to restructure not only corporate income tax rates, but they want to restructure the individual tax rates too. And in exchange, what they're going to be asking the American people, as it says in the slide, is to accept some significant trade-offs, some deductions maybe that you have taken advantage of, that you have been eligible for the past 5, 10, 50 years or so. He's looking to shake up the tax code significantly. And as dealers, I know that many dealers, some dealers file as C corps, as corporations, some file as LLC, some file as pass-throughs, S corps. One of the things we want to be very careful about is that in any sort of corporate tax reform change, or any tax reform change, I should say, that one doesn't pay for the other. In other words, we shouldn't have corporate tax reform without individual tax reform and vice versa. It's a pretty big challenge to take the tax rates down from 33% down to 20%, or from 25% down to 15%. I think the Republicans right now are trying to figure out how they're going to pay for it. And one of the ways they're looking at here is the next thing on the slide is advertising deductibility. We all know advertising and deductibility of advertising has been a legitimate business expense for, I think, almost 100 years. And we know we do a heck of a lot of advertising in auto dealers. Some people say, why is Washington, D.C. looking to take this away? Quite frankly, it raises a lot of money. And it helps in this case the Republicans who are proposing it. If they took away deductibility of advertising, it gives them more money to be able to lower the corporate tax rates and the income tax rates, and perhaps do it on what's called a revenue neutral basis. One of the other things the Republicans have talked about is LIFO. Many of our dealers are on LIFO, still use LIFO, have used LIFO, I think, for going on 70 years, I think. Again, legitimate accounting method that has been used. Why, again? It raises a lot of money. It's a rich revenue target, I think, is the term that a lot of the Republicans like to use when talking about advertising and LIFO. For those of you that are truck dealers, many of you may use what's called like-kind exchange for some of your truck leasing fleets. I know that some dealers out there also are use like-kind exchange for real estate too. Again, one of those targets that Republicans are looking at making some significant changes to. If you're not already talking to your accountant right now about some of these issues, you better start. I know it's tax season right now, or it's about to be tax season. You need to start talking to your accountants sooner rather than later about some of these proposed changes, and what sort of other changes you need to do at your dealership to anticipate it, because tax reform is coming, and it may be coming quicker than you think. Estate tax changes too. NADA, with a lot of our second, third generation, multi-generation businesses, estate tax changes were also in place. Were being proposed at the end of last year by the Obama administration, limiting what's called valuation discounts. Does impact succession planning or estate planning. We do think that has probably gone by the wayside at this point in time with the Republican administration moving over. It was a real focus of the IRS towards in the last quarter of 2016. One thing I want to move on that is not on this slide here, but it has been in the news over the past couple of weeks, particularly with the Trump administration now in power, is something called a border adjustability tax. Or a border adjustment tax, as it's sometimes known. This is one of the more controversial proposals that the president has offered in his America First initiative about stressing American manufacturing and bringing more jobs back to the United States. We have seen some preliminary discussion about this. Again, it is just a proposal at this point in time. We haven't seen anything written on paper. Again, this is one of the ideas of helping to pay for tax reform, is charging a tax on any products that are imported into the United States, let's say from Japan or from Korea or from Mexico. We all know we're in a global industry right now in the auto industry, rely on parts. I think the most American contented vehicle is a Toyota Camry that has about 75% parts content. That still leaves about 25% of that content subject to a border tax, and that could potentially add several $1,000s to the price of the vehicle. Again, it's not just new vehicles. It could be the parts in your inventory. It could be any aftermarket products that you're selling too. This is a major concern for NADA right now. We, however, are not engaging yet. We're just taking in the information. We don't want to fire our guns yet. We don't want to get our grassroots army up in arms yet. But I will tell you, it is becoming a bigger issue. I've talked to a number of people at the convention about this. They're worried about what this could mean, whether this could mean a trigger from some sort of pullback of consumers who can't afford a vehicle. NADA is always very concerned about affordability of vehicles, average price of a new car up to $34,000 or so. Obviously, a border tax could add significantly to the price of a new vehicle or the parts that you all sell. The bottom line here is there is a number of tax reform ideas that are being floated in Washington, D.C. right now. NADA is at the heart of it, wanting to preserve your dealer capital, preserve your ability to sell to consumers at an affordable rate, and that will remain our primary cause in our advocacy work as tax reform begins in Washington, D.C. I also want to give a shout out to our heavy-duty truck dealers, too, for those that are interested. One of the legislative priorities we have been following for a number of months, a number of years, have been the 12% federal excise tax that is charged to every new heavy-duty truck and trailer in this country. Believe it or not, the excise tax goes all the way back to World War I. And has been raised over the number of years. One of the things you may not be aware of, particularly over the past decade, because of new environmental and safety regulations imposed by the federal government, the average price of a Class 8 truck has gone up by about $20,000 just in the past decade alone. So you add 12% on top of that. We believe an excise tax is a discouragement for people who are looking to buy, business owners, owner-operators looking to buy that newer, cleaner, safer, more fuel-efficient truck. Again, it only applies to new trucks. It does not, however, apply to used trucks. So we are looking at a potential removal of the FET altogether, or maybe even a lowering the FET. Because we do think it is a hindrance. It's an administrative headache for a lot of dealers who take in the FET as part of the sales transaction, but then have to remit it to the IRS either on a monthly or a quarterly basis. So it's a headache, and we're going to be working with our ATD Board of Line Reps to address the federal excise tax. Let me talk briefly on deregulatory agenda. The president, obviously, his number one campaign promise is to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, or otherwise known as Obamacare. I think we've seen premiums in our industry and our retail industry go up significantly over the past year or two since the Affordable Care Act first was implemented. We get that. We understand that. This is, I think the Republicans right now, quite frankly, are struggling a little bit. Here we are in late January trying to find an alternative. So if we repeal it, what do we replace it with? I think the president has acknowledged in some of the transition that there are some good things about the Obamacare that should be preserved. I think we're going to have to wait and see what sort of proposals the Republicans come up with regarding replacing Obamacare and making it as smooth of a transition as possible. Dealers obviously very concerned about labor rates, including overtime. There's been some litigation on this in the past 12 months or so, perhaps overturning some Labor Department rules in that regard. One thing I also want to mention too is fuel economy too. We've had a Obama administration that initiated, with the automakers' support of 54.5 miles per gallon fleet-wide average by 2025. We are now seeing, in fact, for those of you that heard Mark Fields during one of our general sessions, this was a point of discussion with the president that came up on Monday, was perhaps talking about either lowering or maybe even extending out the timeframes with that regulation. We all see in our dealerships every single day the penetration of EVs and hybrids and plug-ins that are coming. There are more coming down the line. The automakers are doing their best to meet it. The challenge for us as retailers is getting consumers to buy them. It's a big challenge right now in an era of $2.50 gallon gasoline to expect a customer to pay extra for something that may not give them the return on investment by the time they sell that car. So let's move a little bit to Grassroots. This is where you and the dealer body come in, where you all can engage with us back home. Again, we have a grassroots army ready to deploy 1.1 million people or more when you think about it, if you include our vendors and suppliers, customers. This is where we need you to be the voice of the dealer back home. There's a quote by the famous anthropologist Margaret Mead that struck me a little bit about the impact, and quite frankly, here we are at NADA 100 thinking about what a small group of dealers can do to help change the world, and that's really how NADA got started 100 years ago. Those dealers that came to Washington, D.C. in 1917, we can move mountains. We can do a lot of great things in Washington, D.C. in this country, and all it takes is somebody to get that ball rolling. This is a short video here.
I think Grassroots has been the hallmark of NADA's success in advocacy over the years.
When we go up and visit our legislatures, we talk about our issues as automobile dealers, and a wide range of things, anything from tax issues, LIFO, CFPB, finance issues, all of the things that affect automobile dealers. The legislators are up on the Hill talking about rules and regulations. Many times there might be a disconnect, so it's important for that legislator to come see how a business runs, what goes on in an automobile dealership, what it takes to make it in the automobile business.
ATD's outreach is an initiative that involves dealer visits on Capitol Hill with legislators. And I'm very proud to say that at our second annual fly-in in Washington, D.C. recently, there were 67 dealer visits with legislators to make sure that the truck leaders have a loud and clear voice on Capitol Hill.
Randy and I have been friends for a number of years. He's also our congressman from our district. We all get together and talk about issues that affect our citizens in our district here in the Antioch area.
We work for you. We work for auto dealers. We work for your employees. All of you are my boss. And the only way that I can really understand how I can better serve you, how I can vote in a way that represents your employees, your community, your business, is for me to be able to see it. So this relationship is so important as things happen for me to be able to say, hey, I've got a vote coming up. What do you think about this? Is this good? Is this bad? How's it going to affect your business? How is it going to affect your employees? And how is it going to affect your customers? Having that relationship built ahead of time is really important.
Our automobile dealers are critically important. There's usually the small business owners in most of our communities. I think that automobile dealers are not only a great asset and resource, but just of tremendous value.
I think the important aspect of Grassroots for us all to remember is, generally speaking, members want to meet with their constituents. They want to meet with you, but they also want to meet with your employees. They actually see and remember the employees that they've had a chance to meet with.
Washington, D.C. is a place that thinks it can operate in a vacuum. And we know that's simply not true. So we need the voices of the auto dealers, people who understand what it's like to try to make ends meet, to run the business, to be there when it opens, to be there when it closes, to know that sometimes the paychecks get sent out to everybody else except for themselves. And that's what we need, those voices that actually have that experience to tell Washington what's working, what's not working, and how we can do a better job for the people of this country.
So that's just a short glimpse into what a dealership visit entails, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here. Before we do that, just a short slide on how our Grassroots and our Grass Tops organization is arranged around the country. Hopefully you know who your NADA director is. We have 63 directors for NADA, one from every state, or some of the larger states have more than one. We also have metropolitan areas who have a director. Get to know that NADA director. I also want to give a shout out to our state association executives. These are the men and women who run our state dealer associations and metro dealer associations around the country. A huge help, especially if you have a state regulation or if you have a state legislative issue going on. They are your best advocates in Springfield and Lansing and Phoenix and Sacramento around the country. We're your advocates in Washington, D.C., but they need you to also get engaged at the state level. I also run a program called Congressional Partners and Key Contacts. We've got about 1,300, in fact, a little bit more than that now, dealers around the country who have a personal relationship with a member of Congress that has maybe been a family relationship, could be a business relationship. The member of Congress may come to your dealership and buy the vehicle. If you do have a relationship with that member of Congress, get in touch with me. Let me know. That's part of my job is to connect members of Congress with dealers and vice versa. And I'd love to know if there's a relationship there, or maybe if you want to build that relationship more, I can help do that. As you saw in the video, dealership visits are really the best way for us to make an impact with a legislator, to influence them, to educate them about our business. Members of Congress have been in your businesses before, but they haven't actually toured your business all before. They haven't been to your parts warehouse. They haven't met your techs before. They haven't met your F&I team before. If you've got a body shop, meet the techs in the body shop too. It's a great opportunity, and most importantly, these are 1 hour long visits. They don't take very much time at all. It's a fantastic opportunity to walk them around, have them shake a few hands, have them sit down at a conference table and say, Congressman, here are a few issues that we'd like to talk to you about. And they want to meet it. They want to meet with constituents. They want to meet with voters. They want to be seen in the community as being effective and representing the people's interest. So we have a fantastic opportunity with those 16,500 members around the country, with their brick and mortar operations, with the 1.1 million people we employ. Let me know if you're interested in doing that. A lot of people say, Patrick, I want to do it, but I have no idea how to start. I'm a little intimidated. We've created this graphic here to talk about how you can start the conversation. And I say you start the conversation with facts. The facts are, and you know these facts better than I do, what are the sales taxes that you spent, or what are the sales taxes that you paid last year? How much do you spend on advertising? How many vendors do you have? What's your employee training? How much does the OEM ask you to spend on training here? How much taxes do you pay for the local, state, federal government? How much are your buildings worth? How long have you been there? How many employees do you have? How much do you spend on salaries, healthcare, 401k? How much do you give back to the community? We all know we're big community backers. We're all big philanthropists. But how much do you give back? Make those connections. Facts backed up by stories are the most impactful way to get to know a member of Congress, to make an impression. That's what is most memorable, so that when the member of Congress goes back to Washington and they are looking at a piece of legislation that will impact dealers, they're going to say, you know what, I visited Jack's dealership a couple months ago. I better give Jack a call and ask him what the impact on this legislation, what the impact on his dealership will be if I support or I oppose this legislation. We've got a brochure that's also available online called Making the Grassroots Connection. It's an easy 3-step process to making the connection, to setting up that visit, what to do before, during, and after. For those of you who are social media savvy, if you're interested in joining our NADA Grassroots Network, you can text NADA to 52886. I promise I won't bother you that much, maybe once or twice a year at all. I'll send you a message, keep you in touch, and let you know what's going on in Washington, D.C., and let you know how you can help us. We also have our NADA website, nada.org, and under the Advocacy tab, we have Legislative Affairs, and we have all the issue sheets that you can read and you can understand. You can digest a little bit. They change every so often. In fact, probably every month we make updates to that website as needed. There's my phone number. NADA, office on Capitol Hill, 202-547-5500. If you're interested in setting up a dealership visit, that's my phone number. Again, my job is to connect you with a member of Congress and vice versa. If you want to set up a dealership visit, if you want to get to know the staff in the district, this is how we can start that relationship. Give me a call. I'd love to work with you all. This is all about building a long-term relationship. Again, is no different than what you're doing in the dealership every single day with your customers. That lifetime owner loyalty that you're creating in the dealership is the same thing we're trying to do on Capitol Hill. My business is all about building and maintaining and growing those relationships. Again, our jobs are not all that different. For those of you that are at the NADA convention, come by and visit us at the NADA Pavilion. It's a brand new world of NADA. It's a great opportunity to meet some of the staff who work for NADA, including myself and other departments and other services that we have. So make sure to come by and see us there. Let me talk briefly about political. Again, we talked about policy, we talked about grassroots. I want to talk a little bit about political. Political, again, is really the campaigns and elections that go on every single year. It does cost a lot of money to run for elected office, a federal office. I think an average House race right now is somewhere around $1.8 million, maybe $2 million. For a job that only pays $175,000 a year. I never really understood all that well, that math there. But on the political side, I want to talk a little bit about our NADA PAC. We have had what's called a political action committee for over 40 years now. It used to be known as the Dealers Election Action Committee, and then we went through a rebranding last year, and now it's known as NADA PAC. It is the third largest political action committee in this country among trade associations. Only the realtors are number one, and the beer wholesalers are actually number two. But we're not far behind and looking to grow that again with the support of dealers around the country, contributing to NADA PAC. We've had a great success. We've had about a 94% effectiveness rate in the NADA PAC, and it's a tremendous asset that we appreciate your support for. Because it allows us to open a lot of doors that wouldn't be otherwise. So let's recap, finish up. We want you to get to know some of the issues. We want you to be familiar with some of the issues. We want you to understand what the impact is going to be on your dealership, especially those tax reform issues that are coming down the line and could be coming down the line pretty soon. Get to know talk to your CPA. Engage them. We know, like I said, it's tax season right now. Understand what the impact of any sort of these changes are going to be and what you need to do to protect yourself. We need you to be the voice of the dealer at home. We need you to help us deliver the message. We can only do so much as professional lobbyists for you all in Washington, D.C. We need you to help us backfill that, building that long-term relationship with a member of Congress, getting to know them. This is not a throwaway line at the end. You can make a difference. When you think about us as an association over the past 100 years, what we have been able to do, what mountains we've been able to climb successfully, it's because of the efforts of not us in Washington, D.C., it's the efforts of you around the country supporting what we are doing. You can make a difference. I'll be happy to take any questions for those of you that have any, or if you want to see me afterwards, I'll be happy to answer and have a short discussion with you. Again, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.